Hello, and welcome to Left Undone Incomplete Investigations. I'm Kathryn. Today, we're going to discuss the Lori Vallow Chad Daybell case. Recently, ABC's 2020 released a new episode on the Vallow Daybell case, the gravedigger's wife. It skips around a lot, and it's a bit confusing due to some of the interviews that were filmed early on before Tylee and JJ's remains were actually found in Chad Daybell's backyard. It starts off with Lori's former friend, April Raymond. She describes the beauty of the island of Kauai, Hawaii, and the private wedding of Chad and Lori in Hawaii on November 5th, 2019. Just the two of them, all smiles for the camera, but everyone keeps asking, where are the kids? The reporter asks April if she was invited to the wedding ceremony. April says no, that she didn't think anyone attended. The reporter asks April several questions about Lori and Charles Vallow and Lori's brother, Alex Cox. In my opinion, she's not an expert. April Raymond is not an expert. She's just someone who was a casual friend of Lori. Even April Raymond said she could see this group Lori was talking about was becoming the focal point in Lori's life. She answered yes when asked if she felt she should distance herself from Lori. She said the first time she heard of Chad Daybell, Lori had talked about reading Chad's books. And April said she would define Lori as a super fan of Chad. Most everyone asked the same questions. Why won't she just say where her kids are? Where are the kids, Lori? Where are the kids, right? These are her children. And they were under her care. Lori was asked, where are the kids? Her answer, silence. This silence rubs almost everyone the wrong way. Lori's mom, Janice, and Lori's sister, Summer Shiflett, and her niece, Melanie P., all defend Lori's character. They all say Lori is a good mother. Kay and Larry Woodcock, JJ's biological grandparents, they agree. But these interviews were conducted early on, remember, before the bodies were found. The narrator talks about all of Lori's marriages. In 1992, she married her high school sweetheart, Nelson. In 1995, she married William, and they had Colby, her older son. Lori's third husband was Joseph Ryan, and in 2002, they had Tylee. We see that Lori appeared on Wheel of Fortune and was a beauty contestant in Mrs. Texas pageant in 2004. She was married to Joseph Ryan at the time. Lori was asked on camera what made her tick. She said, being a good mom is important to me, and a good wife, and a good worker, and being all those things together is not easy. So I'm basically a ticking time bomb, she said. Lori and Joe Ryan's marriage started to dissolve after unsubstantiated allegations that Joe was abusing both Colby and Tylee. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, actually assaulted Joe Ryan with a taser. Alex was arrested and imprisoned for aggravated assault. Now, in 2006, Lori married Charles Vallow, and they settled in Chandler, Arizona. The reporter asked April what she thought about Charles Vallow, and April said she felt like he was a great husband to Lori. Lori's mother, Janice, said she thought Charles Vallow was the best of Lori's husbands. She said Charles and Alex were good friends. She said they loved one another. They talk about Charles Vallow's income. He was making $20,000 per month. Lori's sister, Summer Shiflett, said money was very important to Charles. The big cars, the big trips, the big houses, that was mainly Charles, according to her sister. Lori enjoyed those things, but to her, that wasn't as important as having a happy family, Summer insists. Charles and Lori adopted Charles' great-nephew as their own in 2013. They let Charles' sister and brother-in-law, Kay and Larry Woodcock, maintain the grandparents' role in JJ's life. Kay said Lori was a great mom with a special needs child she took on as her own. Larry agreed and said we loved Lori, and Lori was a wonderful mother. Charles and Lori were together for close to 14 years. April, the friend again, said Lori had mentioned the author, Chad Daybell. The narrator said, Chad's an author, and he's a believer that the end of the world as we know it is coming soon. Chad has written dozens post-apocalyptic books, very dark books, where he uses what he describes as fictional characters to describe real events, claiming the future has been channeled through him. This is the literature Lori was reading. April said Alex and Lori came to visit her and talk to her about their mission. They both told her, we're here to gather the 144,000 and you are one of them. April said this was too far out there for her. It didn't connect with me on any level, she says. The reporter asked April, is it fair to say Lori had a fascination with death? April replied, I would say that's pretty accurate. I think even before she started to exhibit changes in her personality, that was something that was always very interesting to her. From April. The reporter asked, at any point when she's talking about all of this, are you thinking in your head, I need to distance myself from Lori? April replied, yes, I did. I did feel that way. The reporter asked April, did Lori tell you she was a translated being? Did she actually use those words with you? April says, she had told me that she was a being that had lived on several worlds. The reporter said, sounds like she's describing herself as a deity or godlike. April replied, exactly, elevating herself above everyone else. Soon, accusations are flying, and Lori's mother, Janice, said, Lori told me Charles accused her of having an affair with Chad Daybell. Charles Vallow spoke with law enforcement on January 31st, 2019. He told them Lori had emptied out his $30,000 payroll bank account. He told them Lori thought she was a translated being and that she would murder him with her powers if he got in the way. If he got in the way of her mission. In my opinion, law enforcement didn't believe Charles. He gets a court order after that to have Lori committed for a mandatory psych evaluation at a mental health facility. But a few hours later, she is discharged. Charles desperately tried to get the Cox family to see that there was something not right with Lori. And when the situation doesn't improve, Charles took it into his own hands to his attorney, Stephen M. Ellsworth. Ellsworth said, I've been a divorce attorney for 30 years, but I've never had anybody that came in that was this specific, that said, I'm afraid I'm going to be murdered. And this is who is going to do it. And here is why it's going to happen. Charles makes that same claim in his divorce filing and also reports it to law enforcement. Ellsworth continues in the interview. He said, Lori told him she was going to have him killed because he was in the way and she had an angel that would dispose of his body once that took place. And Charles was very adamant to me that he wanted to make sure that I let everybody know that if he was killed, that it was Lori who did it. On July 11th, 2019, Alex Cox makes a call to 911 in Chandler, Arizona. He tells the 911 operator that I shot my brother-in-law.
And what is the emergency?
I shot my brother-in-law.
Okay, what part of his body is injured?
In the chest.
I'm sorry, where?
In the chest.
Alex explained Charles Vallow hit him in the head with a baseball bat. We all know, we've seen that. And Alex went into his bedroom, got his gun. He said Charles came at him again with a bat, and Alex said he shot Charles Vallow in self-defense. None of us believe this, right? Law enforcement arrived and asked Alex to come outside, sit on the curb. Law enforcement looked at Alex's head. He was asked to explain, and soon Lori and Tylee show up. And law enforcement asked Lori and Tylee to stand across the street, and they began asking questions. Lori and Tylee both seem to have it together. And Lori smiles and jokes about it, saying, "Sorry, neighbors, we've only just moved in here." Now, I know this is a lot, and basically it's just a review of the timeline, what happened, and how the 2020 episode handled it, and who they spoke to. So, stick with me. Charles had come to pick up JJ to take him to school that morning. Lori and Tylee were taken by law enforcement to be interviewed at the police department. Alex was taken in a separate vehicle to be interviewed by law enforcement. I do have a recording of that drive on my channel as well. According to Lori, Charles left with JJ, got in the car, and realized he had forgotten his cell phone. He left JJ in the car and went back inside the house to retrieve it. She claimed he came in and Lori was looking at his phone, and that's where the argument ensued. She said she had never seen Charles Vallow that enraged. And according to Tylee, she heard the commotion, went into the living room with the baseball bat, and circled around Alex and Lori. Tylee said Charles took the bat away from her. She said Lori guided her out of the house to where JJ was. They got into Charles Vallow's rental car where JJ was, and they took him to school and then returned back to the house. According to Alex, he was at the house supposedly to make sure the handoff of JJ went well. He said he was trying to keep Charles from hurting Lori or Tylee. He said Charles took the bat away from Tylee, and Alex said he noticed Charles going towards Lori and Tylee with the bat. He said he grabbed Charles from behind, and they both fell to the ground. And that's when Charles hit Alex in the head with the bat. Alex said he got up, he went to the bedroom, he retrieved his gun, he went back into the living room, and he told Charles to put down the bat. Alex said Charles just kept coming towards him, and he shot Charles. All three make similar statements that it was self-defense. The detective says they brought Lori back home, and one said she had driven people home after interviews, and this would be at the top of Bazaar. There was a complete lack of emotion from Lori, the detective said. The detectives say Charles Vallow had never been violent with anyone, and it just doesn't make sense. The detectives also say they had never heard from anyone. They said they'd never talked to them since. Charles had $1 million life insurance policy, and Lori had been the beneficiary. After he had spoken to his divorce attorney, he changed the beneficiary to Kay, his sister, because he thought that Kay and Larry Woodcock would be taking care of JJ if something were to happen to Charles. On August 31st, 2019, Lori, Tylee, JJ, and Alex Cox moved to Rexburg, Idaho, where Chad Daybell lives. Lori didn't let Colby even know where they were going, and she didn't tell Kate and Larry either. Lori, Tylee, and JJ moved into a townhome. Alex moved into a unit at the same complex, but this is never mentioned on the show. Chad was living with his wife, Tammy, and their children in Rexburg when Lori moved up there with Tylee and JJ. So about a week after they arrived in Rexburg, on September 8th, 2019, Lori, Alex, Tylee, and JJ took a little road trip to Yellowstone National Park. That was the last sighting of Tylee. On September 19th, 2019, Melanie Gibb and David Warwick visit Lori in Rexburg. Soon after that, Lori told Melanie Gibb that JJ had become a zombie the day before. She said JJ loves Satan. She said JJ was sitting still and watching TV and had an increased vocabulary as proof. While there, Melanie had visited BYU, Idaho, and walked around the track several times with Lori and Chad. She said she never saw Tylee. On September 22nd, Melanie, David, and Lori were beginning to make a podcast. JJ started acting up, so Alex takes JJ to Alex's townhome. Later that evening, Alex brings JJ back home, and JJ appeared to be sleeping with his head on Alex's shoulder. This was the last sighting of JJ. On Monday, September 23rd, Melanie and David are getting ready to leave, and David asked Lori where JJ was. Lori told him that JJ had climbed up onto the kitchen cabinets, knocked down a picture of Jesus Christ, and it was on the refrigerator. He knocked it off the refrigerator, and he got between the cabinet and the ceiling, and Alex had come back over and taken JJ with him. On October 2nd, 2019, back in Arizona, Brandon Boudreau, who is Melanie Pulowski's ex-husband, Lori's niece, Melanie, called 911 and reported someone in a Jeep took a shot at him and barely missed him and hit his driver's side window. Brandon paid a visit to a private investigator, Rich Robertson, and explained he recognized the Jeep as Charles Vallow's, and he told Robertson he believed it was Alex Cox who reached out of the back of the vehicle and took a shot at him. He believed Alex's motivation was to kill him so Melanie could collect on Brandon's $1 million life insurance policy, since she was the beneficiary. Melanie said she had the uncomfortable conversation with her Uncle Alex and asked him if he took a shot at Brandon. She said Alex said no, and he's a comedian, and he joked about it, and he said, "Melanie, me? In a recognizable car right across the street? And I'm a great shot." It didn't add up. Brandon knows me and knows I wouldn't do that. No one has been charged at this point. On October 9th, 2019, Tammy Daybell came home with groceries. She later posted on her Facebook page that a man in a ski mask tried to shoot at her with a paintball gun. She said she didn't think it was loaded. She said she asked him what he thought he was doing, but he never spoke. She said she yelled for Chad, and the man ran off behind their house. 10 days later, on October 19th, Tammy Daybell supposedly died in her sleep. She was 49 years old, and Tammy was buried in the Springville, Utah cemetery. There was never an autopsy at that point. Chad received $430,000 life insurance payout. The narrator said Chad and Lori had spoken to others about zombies and dark spirits. They said their mission was to rid the world of zombies. Law enforcement began the process of re-examining everyone and everything with a connection to Chad, including exhuming his late wife's body. Kay Woodcock and Charles were really close siblings. They shared a lot of things, including his passwords. Kay said, in September of 2019, we had found out Lori was ordering from Charles' Amazon account. I clicked on that and found their address and apartment number and everything. Larry Woodcock said, "There's no way you can make me believe that in their hearts they actually believe this BS. One morning, you're going to wake up and you've got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, 'My God, what have I done?'" On November 5th, 2019, while Lori and Chad are in Hawaii getting married, while law enforcement are uncovering evidence of foul play. So speaking to Kay and Larry Woodcock, the reporter said it seemed like everywhere Lori was, people were either dead or missing. They both agreed, yeah, it all tied back to the newlyweds and Lori's brother, Alex. Evidence like that ring on Lori's finger, the Amazon ring, the receipt from Amazon showed it had been purchased before Tammy Daybell's death. After the wedding of Chad and Lori in Hawaii, they both returned to Rexburg shortly after returning on November 26th 2019, detectives showed up at Lori's door. They wanted to conduct a welfare check that was called in by Kate and Larry Woodcock. Law enforcement spoke to both Alex and Chad, and according to the police, even though Chad and Lori were already married, Chad acted like he didn't even know Lori very well. Detective Ray Hermosillo asked Chad for Lori's phone number, and he stated, "I don't have it." Chad's like, "I don't have her number." The detective found it suspicious because he knew Chad and Lori were married earlier in the month. Alex said JJ was fine. He also said he was with his grandparents in Louisiana. That was a lie. And the detective told him that was unlikely because that's who called in the welfare check. When law enforcement finally talks to Lori, she lies. She tells them JJ is with her friend Melanie Gibb, when actually Melanie Gibb has no idea where JJ is. According to law enforcement, once the police left, Lori doubled back and called Melanie and asked her to lie and say JJ was with her. This confused Melanie, put her on the spot, and the narrator says Melanie Gibb tells police JJ was never with her. This episode doesn't state that Melanie Gibb lied about JJ to law enforcement in Arizona. With the police closing in, Chad and Lori left. The very next day, they busted out of there. They went to Hawaii, and Alex went in a completely different direction, and he decided to marry his girlfriend, Zulema Pastenis, in Las Vegas. Alex decided to take Zulema's last name as his own. They never mentioned Melanie marrying Ian or on that same trip, and they never mentioned Ian Pulowski at all in the whole episode. Annie Cushing is featured in the special. She said to the reporter, "I'm Tylee, Ryan's aunt, and Joseph, Ryan's sister. As Tylee's advocate, I need to turn over every rock I possibly can find." There was also an interview with Julie Rowe. Julie Rowe told the reporter, "I'm an author and a podcaster, and Chad published my first 5 books." Julie said Chad had told her the two of them had been married before. She said he claimed he had been Methuselah and that I was one of the 7 of Methuselah's wives. After Alex and Zulema got married, they settled down in Arizona. Lori and Chad were trying to lay low in Hawaii. The narrator said Melanie Gibb called Lori and Chad and had questions, and Melanie wanted some answers. The reporter said she came up with an idea to record Lori and get her to talk about the lie Lori had asked her to tell. It never states anything about Melanie lying to law enforcement or that she waited almost 10 days before returning law enforcement's calls. Melanie was trying to get Lori to admit that she tried to get Melanie Gibb to lie about JJ's whereabouts. Later, that call was released. And this is the call where Melanie Gibb asks, "Is JJ safe?" Lori's answer is, "He's safe and happy." On December 11th, 2019, Rexburg law enforcement traveled to Utah to exhume Tammy Daybell's body to perform an autopsy. The very next day, there's a 911 call in Arizona that was just now released. I'll have the video up. Zulema, adult son, Joseph, makes the call, telling the operator about an older male here named Alex that was passed out, not aware that Alex was his stepfather. Zulema arrives home 5 minutes into the call, and her son informed her it was really bad. It's really bad. Alex was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Alex was 51 years old. I have to admit, when the 911 call tape about Alex was played, they showed a video of Alex made likely during a voiceover rehearsal. The camera focused in on Alex's eye. It was actually really creepy. They showed Melanie P., and she said she had gotten the call about her uncle's passing from a shocked Zulema. Melanie said, "How can I trust someone else like I trusted Alex? He was like a vault," she says. The narrator said, "Here's this guy. He's killed one husband, although he said it was in self-defense. And then he's being looked at in the disappearance of these 2 children, and now he's dead." Now law enforcement is trying to find out how he died. The medical examiner ruled Alex's cause of death as natural. Bilateral pulmonary embolisms. Well, pulmonary embolisms. I don't know if they were bilateral. Lori and Alex's mother, Janice, said about Alex's death, we had him cremated and those were his wishes. We had a service for him and we didn't invite anyone to his service who thought he was a murderer. So it was a very small, precious group that loved him that came. Now, on December 20th, 2019, Rexburg law enforcement issued a press release announcing that JJ and Tylee are missing and endangered. Missing and endangered children. That's when the story goes national. On January 7th, 2020, the $20,000 reward is announced by Kay and Larry Woodcock in Rexburg during a press conference. On January 25th, 2020, in Kauai, Hawaii, Chad and Lori are located by local law enforcement, and she was served with a court order that said she had to produce JJ and Tylee in 5 days in Rexburg. The deadline comes and goes without a peep from Lori, and the narrator says, East Idaho News obtained surveillance footage from a storage facility in Idaho. It showed footage of Lori and possibly Alex making multiple trips to the storage locker. Law enforcement searched the storage locker and found a scooter, a backpack with JJ's initials on it, and they found a photo album with photos of JJ and Tylee. Lori and Chad go on with their lives. There are people taking photos and videos of them, and they were filmed by this show and asked where the children were on this Dateline show. On February 20th, 2020, Lori was finally arrested without incident. She went in for her first court appearance the next day, and she was charged with 2 felony counts of desertion and non-support of dependent children, and resisting or obstructing officers, among other charges. Her bond was set at $5 million. The narrator said Marcus Moore of ABC introduced himself to Chad right after Lori's court appearance. And Marcus Moore said he introduced himself to Chad and wanted Chad to know he had no preconceived notions about him or Lori or the case. On March 5th, 2020, Lori was extradited back to Rexburg, Idaho. Lori and Chad were able to see each other again during Lori's first court appearance in Idaho. Lori's smirk, I'll never forget that smirk, at Kay and Larry Woodcock while leaving the court, it was sickening. It was sickening. Chad looked a bit nervous, and he was still free, but not for long. The narrator said, police will tell you when Alex Cox died, a lot of secrets died with him, except for one, and it was on his phone. CAS, or Cellular Analysis Surveillance, was able to track Alex's cell phone pings on the days in question. CAS was able to determine all of Alex's cell phone movements on September 8th and 9th, and on the 22nd and the 23rd. Also, Alex's text to Tammy about the fictitious raccoon made right after Alex's phone left the Daybell property, CAS was able to determine where Alex's phone pinged and within 20 feet where the phone pinged. It's completely fascinating technology, like way close. Amazing. There's one question that has always remained the same. Where are the kids? Where are the kids? People wanted to know why Chad and Lori could walk around free for so long, but now we understand why. The investigators needed time to piece the whole thing together. Rick Ross, a cult expert, explained why this was allowed to happen. He said, they'll make a mistake, typically along the way. They'll make phone calls, they'll go bury something, or try to get rid of evidence. The word zombie in Chad and Lori's world relates to the beliefs of their new church, the Church of the Firstborn. Zombies are the people who always seem to have dark spirits. Rick Ross explained they were no longer seen as human beings. Who JJ was, who Tylee was, are not anymore in their belief system. Look at it this way, he says. Chad and Lori have created a completely different reality. On June 9th, 2020, law enforcement and the FBI served a search warrant at Chad Daybell's property. Rick Ross explained they don't just dig, they started peeling away layers. Somewhat like an archaeological dig to a certain extent. Detective Hermosillo explained what was found while testifying at Chad's preliminary hearing. Detective Hermosillo described exactly what was discovered. They removed some topsoil that was right under the sod, which revealed 3 large white rocks. Underneath the white rocks was some thin wood paneling. As soon as they removed the paneling, I could smell the odor of a decomposing body. It was what appeared to be a small body, tightly wrapped in black plastic covered in duct tape. Again, Rick Ross explained, then they moved to another section of the property based on cell phone pings. Near the fire pit, they started finding charred remains. The FBI had brought in a forensic anthropologist with them to the scene. Again, Detective Hermosillo explained at Chad's preliminary hearing there was a melted green bucket which burnt flesh had been placed in, and underneath the bucket was a partial human skull. Identified through dental records, it matched Tylee. The reporter said Chad was initially on his driveway in his car and he was watching all this go on, right, in real time. Then he moved his car across the street to his daughter's house that she was living in across the street and watched from there. As soon as the remains were found, Chad decided to take a drive. Police think otherwise and pull him over and arrest him. Rick Ross said, I don't think Chad had any emotional connection at all to what they were doing in the backyard. I think he's thinking, I'm in trouble. Antisocial personalities. They have no guilt. He thinks he's a slick dude that basically he's thinking, okay, now you found these bodies here, now prove that I killed them. And that is where we are at this point. Ross is asked, how sure were they at that point when they went digging that they were gonna find those children? Ross answered, I think they thought they were on the money. And another reason is, I think totally exhausted that these kids were someplace else. The reporter said, I'm curious because you talked about Chad and his antisocial behavior. That's one person. Now you have Lori, capable of being part of this, and Alex as well. How unusual is it that you would have 3 people capable of doing something that is unthinkable to almost every human being when it comes to children especially? Rick Ross answered, they take on this attitude that we're superior to everyone else, we're superior, and we live in a different reality, and the world's going to change, and they think the world is going to end, and the second coming, and they're going to be the king and queen of England, for the rest of us will disappear. It's such a bizarre and high-risk thing to do. The reporter asked Ross, do you see murder charges coming? Ross answered, I think the jury's going to look at these 2 and say, you 2 are the zombies, not these kids. The reporter said, the biggest mystery in this case is who did it. If you believe that one of these 3 people killed these children, who killed which child? How did they actually do it? While I think there could be murder charges in the future, I wonder if they're looking for something more. Ross continued, if you lay out all this behavior we're talking about today, I'll tell you, working homicide cases for 30 years is pretty darn compelling. Please. They play the phone call made by Lori to Chad during the search. This was the last phone call between them. Moments later, Chad was arrested. The reporter said, Chad prophesized that the world was going to end in July of 2020. You have to wonder how Lori feels now that Chad's prediction didn't come true, is what he says. Marcus Moore ends the episode by saying the following: at the end of the day, you want justice. They seemed like they would brighten the world. When you look at their pictures, just for their sake, you hope and pray for justice in this case. I know I do. I know we're all sitting on pins and needles waiting for murder charges. And my channel has followed this case from literally from day one, from the day it hit the news. If you want to go back and really review this case, I probably have 150, not including the live streams, recorded videos on this. I was the original channel that received the zombie letter email. And if you go back and read the comments, people thought it was just insane and nuts. And they're like, yeah, right. But Melanie Gibbs' friends released that zombie email. It was sent to a person who sent it to me, and it hit here on my channel. And it's unbelievable to me how important that piece of information is. All those pieces of information. I didn't even know what I was reading when I was reading it. It was insane. But that's my review, and a big review of that episode of 2020. Please subscribe, like, ring the bell for notifications if you haven't done that, so you know when I put out a new video. And if you want to go check out my travel channel, I'm just getting started over there, so you can follow me around in my world when I travel. It's a travel vlog. Thanks for watching Left Undone, Incomplete Investigations. I'm Kathryn. Be safe. Stay well.